Before Harry could press either of them, or even to comment that the watchstone was very like a pensieve, Jewel leaned towards it, and then looked at Crystal Lear in the way that someone might look at a person who might suddenly lean forward and bite. "A seer," he said plainly. "Indeed. I see the future, like my mother, and her mother before her. Not to influence it, not to tamper with it, my skills are fully absent in these areas. Just to see the future, no more or less. Unbidden. Ah yes, your mother is the famous Ragnhild Anderson, currently incarcerated at the Durmstrang Institute." Jewel folded his arms as if that closed the matter. The girl was half mad. The boy had spent the night with her and had not, therefore, been in the corridor and threatened to do anything for an internship, including anything being conjurist activities. If he, Harry, could rationalize this, then the much cleverer Witten jurors would too. "I would not describe her position there as incarcerated, sir," replied Crystal Lear evenly, her voice a synonym of her name, "inasmuch as yours might be inaccurately described as elevated in professional standing beyond all reasonable expectation. Her vision is such that it has begun to torment her more and more." "Ha! A teller of fortunes," Jewel dismissed, ignoring the obvious ironic slight. "So, tell me, Miss Brandt, what ill wind will become of me? Will I die very old and rich?" He laughed, mockingly. "You, sir, shall live until R117. You will die when your house catches fire as you turn away a group of very young Halloween children who leave behind their jack-o'-lantern on your wicker doormat that they had forgotten to take with them, in their upset at your meanness to them. And you, Mr. Herbert, you will." "That is quite enough." Draco Malfoy picked up his hand, halting Crystal Lear in her flow. "I believe you are having these good gentlemen on. You have declared that you cannot read the future, only channel it, your response being a light-hearted jest to their ribbing to your particular seer's skills," he added, a pinch of warning in his voice, suggesting that this wasn't the way witnesses were to be questioned in his Witten. "You can verify your boyfriend's whereabouts?" "Yes," nodded Crystal Lear. "Callias Lupin?" "Yes." "Please instruct your unspeakables to examine the authenticity of this memory, with respect to this case." "Indeed." "And now, we will adjourn for the present time. Following a short recess, the defendants Swales and Blewett will be heard and a verdict with respect to Sam Potter's involvement in conjurism at Hedgewood's. 88,888,888. I don't think I want to go back in." Hermione leaned against Harry's shoulder as they sat in Arthur Weasley's office, holding hands. Harry, closing his eyes and thinking about all that had gone on that afternoon, and it was not even 2 o'clock in the afternoon yet, felt exactly the same way. "And did you see your mother's face when Crystal Lear said she'd spent the night with Sam?" "She didn't mean it in that way, of course," replied Harry, sighing with the effort of keeping his eyes open. "Just that he stopped up all night with her, and didn't go back to his room. So he'll be in trouble for breaking Hedgewood's rules, at least. But I doubt they've slept together." He felt Hermione pull back from him, giving him a look which said, "I wouldn't be too sure about that. They are 18, you know," before laying her head back on his shoulder. Instead, she mumbled, "Do we have to go back in now? I feel all washed out." Inwardly, Harry nodded. He'd burned the candle at both ends, preparing all of the evidence for the next bit of the trial, the bit they were all there for, not these peripheral pieces about Felixson and Henrietta and Sam. But maybe, that was Cleus's elaborate plan. They all connected to Blewett and Thales through conjurism and extreme wizard views. The Witten needed, he supposed, to pass judgment on these first before the 2 wizard defendants were tried. Maybe Cleus knew what he was doing after all. At least it'll all be over. They can't send Henrietta and Vincento to Azkaban, but they can Thales and Blewett. At least it'll get rid of conjurism. then people can start getting back to normal and stop hating one another and calm down, and my parents won't have to work so hard, and yours," Harry added, watching a thin furrow appear on his future wife's brow, "won't have to live in fear. We can get on with the wedding, and people can just calm down." "That'll be good," agreed Hermione, closing her eyes, and leaning into Harry again. He pulled her close and wrapped his arm around her. A little bit of peace and quiet for a few minutes would do them both good. They could stop here a while, they weren't needed again, or at least Hermione wasn't, and they probably wouldn't be missed from the balcony. 88,888,888. "Where have you been?" Lily Potter's hissed angrily as Harry returned to the chairs next to her. He had had to push through as so many witches and wizards had got up there to view proceedings, but it seemed that a lot of the main part of the vote and decision-making had already happened. As Harry had climbed the gallery stairs, he noticed that both Draco Malfoy and Gordon Brown were not in their chairs, and his father explained, a little more patiently, but only just a little, that they had given their accounts of the night, that they had been at Hedgewood's and had made no further comment. James also explained that Bluewit's wife Anne, the founder member of the non-wizard reciprocators, had testified and given her account, which, while sounded like bad news for her husband, did not go against him, nor did it implicate Thales Bluewit in any way at all. She even had us humming "We Shall Overcome" as she sung it, telling us that we all needed to reciprocate our time and our skills with our fellow non-wizards, and, "Just because I'm married doesn't mean I cannot hold different beliefs to my husband, and him from me," she had declared, before embracing Thales Bluewit on her way back to her seat. Draco Malfoy declared Anne Bluewit's an excellent point. "I feel that sharing what is come to us all is important. He believes in understanding the fundamentals of wizard kind to be equally so, and we respect one another's beliefs." "Wow," said Harry, looking down into the chamber. His and Hermione's moment to themselves had resulted in him missing quite an important bit of action. "Wow indeed," said a voice next to him. He turned to see his Aunt Petunia, smiling kindly at him. When put like that, who could argue? "Aunt Petunia," Harry said, and hugged her. No matter how his mum felt, he had always liked her. It had been hers and Regulus's decision to stay away from their wizarding circle. Now she was here, but why? "Lily," she nodded, her face grumpling. "But oh, you look." No words passed for a moment, and then, in a rare moment, both sisters hugged one another. "Lose the battle to win the war, Lily," Petunia said, when they'd sat back down. Below them the Witan had not yet reassembled. "You're overdoing it. Perhaps there's something you can take out of your schedule that you don't need to be doing to take the pressure off." "That's what I've said, Bet," said James, leaning over and hugging his sister-in-law around the shoulders. "She seems to be putting too much into everything. She needs to take care of herself. Maybe when this is over, when Sam has come through this, there's no evidence against him. He'll get a ticking off by Severus and everything will go back to normal. Can you think of nothing you can do less of, Lils?" The question seemed to hang for a moment between them, Harry's mum seemingly at a loss as to what to say. Then, she smiled, which seemed to take some effort, but a genuine smile nonetheless, and raised a hand towards her sister's jacket lapel. "NWR," Lily said. "You've joined the Newers?" "Yes," nodded Petunia. "And Bluewit is compelling, isn't she? All of this, liaising with you, James, a full-time business, her children, everything. There are NWR's institutes springing up all over the place. Women are flocking to join, witches and non-witches alike. It's a sensation. What the conjurists have been destroying, tea and cakes in church halls all over the country are rebuilding tenfold." But, before either of them could say anything else, thankfully, Harry thought to himself, because whenever his mum and his aunt appeared to be getting on, one of them would say something and it would spark a cold war between them. The Wizengamot wizards of the Witten were returning. When he recounted the conclusion of the Witten to Hermione that evening, of Cleus Lupin, Gordon Brown and, of course, Draco Malfoy, summing up the Witten for their particular representatives, who would have been able to tell then that the outcome would be like it ended up being. They had, during their recess, decided on a number of matters amongst themselves, and now was the time they would declare them to the wizards present. Cleus restated that the restrictions of half-breeds brought into the country still stood, and that those present should be brought to the ministry to be made so that their condition renders them without their senses, something which Bluewitt's defense lawyers claim was not in law at the time the attacks happened, and therefore the defendants could not be fairly represented. This would be overseen by representatives of the non-wizard government and non-wizards ordinary, non-magical people, to show that it has been done fairly. Clearly, Cleus was taking no chances. This is a nation distinct from European mindset, Cleus had declared, and within another that is even more distinct. Swales, you are prosecuted for bringing in and keeping half-breeds when knowingly a danger due to their condition and not doing enough to prevent injury to the public, not least public law enforcementers who came to you house in their capacity as such. However, the results from your wands say that this is not a genuine memory. Cleus unfolded a parchment much like that of Demescujules when he was questioning Crystalia. Conjurists are responsible but necessarily the defendants. Even now, in the quiet of their rented house, their possessions slowly being put into boxes ready for the day that their deposit meant they could get a place of their own, he could hear the gasp of shock from them all. This was unprecedented. Even the unreadable Cleus Lupin looked as if it was the last statement he wanted to be reading out. Evelyn Fortescue had then declared this had been brought into law during the Witten discussion and, as head of the Magical Environmental Protection Agency for all three of the Witten representatives had unanimously agreed, but she might as well have saved her breath. The so-called conjurists, even Bluewit, whose wife had almost given admissible evidence on behalf of her husband. Then the subject of Cecilia Lupin had been brought up. Despite Cleus's insistence that she was not the scope of the Witten, Cleus called to give evidence about Cecilia, about Tabitha. And then, if that weren't enough, and enough of a deviation from the Witten's conventions in any case, Regulus Black had been called to give evidence. Are you doubting my abilities? Harry could still hear his uncle demand. I can set up a flu anywhere, at any time, can sing anyone to anything. Impossible. What with the communication blackout? Which I was called upon to impose, Regulus had pointed out, standing in the center of the chamber, jeans and a Guernsey jumper in thick, navy blue, his black hair bedraggled, but his mouth merry and his eyes bright. There's always a back door, so to speak. Put me to the test, if needs be. But there had been no needs be. All who knew Regulus knew he was the best in his field by miles. What of pensive communication? The storing of memories, and messages and music, in a virtual place, hidden, and unseen, as magical data, his uncle had clarified, when pressed by Cleus. Then it can be retrieved by someone with the correct passkey, or if it's free to share, anyone. Anyone? Of course, agreed Regulus. There are a lot of free-to-share memories available in the portable pensive dimension, which makes the future very interesting. A lot of potential. And a lot of potential to go wrong. You suspect, Cleus, that conjurists use this method to transmit information, to share extreme views, to coordinate attacks? And that was it, thought Harry. The Witten had been called to declare a lot of things, publicly. But, the irony of it was that, in doing so, the wizards who were, undoubtedly responsible for the fragments of glass shattering in synchronization on Halloween night, terrorizing and hospitalizing hundreds, had not enough evidence, despite it all, to be prosecuted for it. Harry looked into the fire and remembered how Cleus had said to Draco Malfoy, once Regulus had had his moment to shine for his quirky brilliance. Indeed I do. The unspeakables have documented hundreds, probably thousands of cases where this has happened. In isolation, they could be explained away, but the body of evidence accumulated is difficult to explain in its entirety as coincidence. Do any of these incidences involve the wizards on trial here today? Indeed, pertaining to half-breeds. Yes, your brother being so ill in hospital from such attacks. And at that, Harry had told Hermione, he had actually shown some emotion, at last. Mum had held his hand again, Dad had sighed. Poor Remus, just couldn't come through it yet, not like Sirius. Bitten by the wrong half-breed. Severus is trying his best, Petunia had pointed out. It was comfort. She was good at that, Harry thought. But a thin thread. But they did not do enough to prevent injury. They are guilty of neglect of responsibility for grievous injury occurring in their houses. Draco Malfoy had stood at this point, and raised his white, bone-like wand. Be under no doubt, that although we are distinct, and in this country of Scotland, in this nation of Great Britain, and Northern Ireland, someone had piped up. And Northern Ireland, Draco Malfoy continued smoothly, those features which make wizards distinct from non-wizards do not allow for the promotion, teaching and practicing of conjurism within the magical law or that of the non-magical law. Furthermore, this federal alliance of wizard and indeed non-wizard nations, that is European wizards, will not tolerate division that has led to hatred and intolerance between us. The conjurist perpetrators of 30th October are not, according to the evidence we have seen today, Thales Blewett and Mark Swales. However, these wizards are guilty under wizard law of illegally bringing half-breeds into the country and, through lack of care, allowing the half-breeds to attack heroes of the ministry who were going about their duties. We sentence Mark Swales to a month's imprisonment, 6 months for Thales Blewett, being the homeowner and instigator of the importing of the creatures. And that was that. Harry sat, in the semi-darkness, wondering how the Daily Prophet would report on Rivington. Horror is the only word he could think to describe the sentence, agreed by all three men representing all three political realms. Horror from defense, that they have been imprisoned at all. Horror from reciprocators, that was not enough time, surely, for the life-changing, life-limiting injuries inflicted on Sirius and Remus. And there was horror that non-ratified laws were, on the basis of the Witan, about to be enshrined in British, wizard, and non-wizard, and European. Should non-wizards perceive a threat to be threatening, this was now a crime. There needn't even be any actual evidence, it relied on the non-wizard's opinion and viewpoint. Anyone actively impeding this was also liable for prosecution. That was not all. All temporary communication methods were to be kept closed for now in line with the requirements of the non-wizard government, which was separateness from wizards for a time. That's almost impossible, we are as one. People were shouting. It's like trying to divide on geography, or gender, or religion. It won't work, it's wrong. But it would have to, thought Harry. It had been decided, by the three people most important, politically, to this country. The Vale was also to be closed for security and, although no one had mentioned it, Harry had been sure everyone had been thinking that Tabitha Benright had better be special enough to get back from beyond it via another means, should she need to come back imminently, especially as, another headline choice for the Prophet, all Pensieves were to be outlawed, with immediate effect, the ministry handling an amnesty for them over the next 3 months. Tabitha will do it, James whispered across to Harry, just loud enough for Lily, Petunia, and Macmullen, who had also been there, to hear them. She needs to be behind the veil, and that's the important part. What will happen will have happened anyway, too much has begun for it to be stopped. But we have a chance to run this in our favor, Tabitha will do it. But the final thing, the very last, was to come. Sam, as Petunia had said, was indeed exonerated. So, as the Potters and Blacks sat in the gallery of the Wizengamot chamber, used that day for a very old Witan, they felt the comfort of relief, especially when Sam himself came up the stairs to join them. Behind him, hovering a little way back, was Crystal Leah, and behind her, Severus Snape, ready to take them both back to Hedgewoods. Mum, Dad, Sam, like them, had been so happy to be unburdened from the strain of prosecution, and both his parents had congratulated him for his conduct. Just as Harry had been about to say something, however, Sam's face crinkled into folds, worry etched upon it again. The relief hadn't been quite as sweet as it had seemed. It was Severus Snape who had told them that Sam had had his internship place revoked. His conduct at school has not been as exemplary as we would have wished, Snape had begun, and, just when his dad had been about to argue, it had turned out it hadn't been Severus's doing. Callias had made the decision. Callias. Behind the closing of the veil, behind the non-wizard students at Hedgewoods, which was a good idea, but hadn't really worked, and probably had caused some of this trouble, Harry reasoned. And then, when Lily and Petunia had gone to Sam and Crystal Leah, and spoken to them away from Callias, James and Severus, a sensible move, Harry reasoned. All in all, the minister had then confirmed the veil would be closed indefinitely, much to Severus's protestations. We are too far down the line to go back now. This can be explained politically because of today. And you said yourself, Severus, you knew of no one else than Tabitha who could do what we needed. And that had been when he had told them that Cecilia would also be kept at Durmstrang indefinitely, or at least until she had solved the fundamentals of old magic. She needed to be the least of their worries, Callias had said. The way he had said it, though, sounded more as if Durmstrang was Cecilia Lupin's prison rather than sanctuary. Harry closed his eyes, the warmth of the fire making him think of the many-faceted event which had occupied a lot of the day, before opening them again and staring into the flames. Callias's triumph, the cynical part of his mind reminded him, a Witten superseded anything which had gone before and overrode any law with which it conflicted. It had been hosted by the three leaders under which the British people were held sovereign, each one had authority in their own way for their people. All those people had to do today was play their part. The Witten was both a line drawn in the sand and a brick wall. Which she won't, because she is focusing on a cure for Remus, Petunia had said, who had rejoined the conversation, her NWR badge twinkling through in the darkness. And she has told you so? Callias had asked, darkly. Her priorities are as obvious as the sun in the sky, Callias Lupin, Aunt Petunia lightly said. If you listened to people more, you would have less to worry about. Harry closed his eyes for the final time that night, drawing his legs under him, not hearing the bell-like tinkling sound a little way off, under the stairs.